In this video, I'm going to show you some crafty things you can do with text. The first thing we're going to do is open up a text box and write a word. Now it should be noted, if you have a fancy, very decorative typeface, like let's say this one, I'm not going to try to say it because I have no idea how it's said, you don't really need to do much with this to make it look good. You could change the color of it, and that will change like the decorations to be that color. And you can also, layer a background color. That's what this background thing is. And let's just change this color so that way you can see it underneath. And now let's go to layers. So you can layer things like that, but if you're using a very decorative typeface, you don't generally need to do much with it to make it look good. Like even without layering it, both of these are pretty attention grabbing. But what would you do if you're using a more simple typeface, or if your idea just doesn't fit with the way that those typefaces, those like really decorative typefaces are designed? So let's go back and get another text box out, and we're going to type word. When you guys are making your books, you're going to be using actual words that have significance, like your titles and authors, but I don't really have anything to write right now, so I'm just going a little basic. And I'm just going to make this pretty big. I made it too big for my text box, so I have to drag out the text box. Oops, I just accidentally rotated it, so I hit undo. Okay, so here's my very simple word. So a lot of the time when people are trying to emphasize a typeface or they want to make it look more exciting, their first impulse is to outline the text or add a stroke. So what they would do is, just add a stroke. And I'm going to encourage you not to do that basically ever. I guess there are situations where it could be useful, but most of the time what it does is it just like kind of goofs up the space in between the letters, and it just makes the letters look really strange and unflattering. So let's undo this, Command or Control Z, and let's look at another way that you can, hitting W to get out of preview mode. Let's look at another way that we can emphasize the text, even outlining it, I guess, kind of, without adding a stroke. So what I'm going to do is hold down Option, and, well, first I have to select this. Now if I hold down Option, I'm able to duplicate it. You can tell that I'm duplicating it because now I have a second arrow. I'm going to drag it out. Now I'm going to highlight this and take the tint down to 75. Okay, now I can just align them. I can keep doing this. If you just want it once, that's fine. But you can keep doing it to add a pretty cool effect. I'm kind of making like a grayscale of sorts by doing this. Now if you start introducing color, that would also be cool here, but I'm just focusing on black and white right now and just showing you how you can make cool things stand out without even adding color. Or I guess by changing the values, which is part of the color. So I think if we look at this in preview mode, I think this looks pretty cool, and it's a cool effect that we can do. You can also offset it vertically. There's like a whole world of stuff you can do. Another thing that I think is fun with this method is if you were to add maybe white in it. So let's say over here, I'm going to make this one white. Let's lock the rest of them. What can be a little bit tricky about this is just selecting the right one. And instead, let's make this white. Just to see what it looks like. And I think that looks pretty cool. Another thing we could do is duplicate this one more time and make, see how everything's locked? Now we can't use it. Okay, so I'm just going to select the one on top and duplicate that one. Let's just click away. Okay, now it's the right one. And I'm going to make this one white, just to see what that's like. I quite like that. I think it's kind of interesting. And it's cool how it blends off into the side. And on the tops and the bottoms. Okay, so that's like one way that you can do this, and offsetting it in different directions changes how it looks. But what I want to try to encourage you to do is think about the effects you want back in relation to your thumbnails. So I'm just going to delete this, and I'm going to reference my thumbnails. So what I have in this bottom right corner idea is kind of saying that I want to try changing the opacity and overlaying the letters on top of each other to try to make the letters look like they're vibrating. Changing the opacity also sounds interesting to me because it's called landscape with invisible hand, and taking the opacity down will make it a little bit invisible. So I'm gonna play around with this on over here, and the first thing I'm gonna do is take the opacity down. In InDesign and in the Adobe programs in general, opacity is kind of like the saturation. It's how much of the color is present. So you can think of the tint as the value, and the saturation is the opacity. So if I take the opacity down to 30, you know what, I think it's easier to see this with shapes. So let's look at a box, and I'm going to fill it in with pink, or magenta rather, and I'm going to take the opacity down to 50. Now if I make another box, I'm just duplicating this box, and it also has an opacity. See how when they're overlaid together, this is 100, but by themselves they're each 50. So it's showing the light through. If we change the color, let's say to yellow, and this is at 50, right? So this is kind of how opacity works. Here we're getting a nice color blend. Of course, we're only dealing with one color at this point. We're only dealing with black and white. So I just turn the opacity down to 30, which means that if I duplicate this, we're going to see through. And where they overlap, it's going to be darker. I've just duplicated it one more time. Now I'm going to make the opacity up to 60, just to add some variation. And now I'm going to make, I don't know what I just did there, but I'm going to hit cancel. And there we go. You want to make sure that it is a little bit possible to read. But see, that's the kind of the thing that I'm doing. And this isn't something I'm doing just because I can. I'm doing it because it is an idea that I'm trying to convey. It's kind of, this is a sci-fi book, so I'm trying to make it look a little bit sci-fi and play into what the title is. So landscape with invisible hand, I made it a picture frame, and the text is a little bit invisible. Now this works, this kind of thing works here because the text is really big. I don't think that it would work as well if I did it here. I can try and see what happens, but over here it doesn't really fit into the idea so much, because here it's supposed to represent like a little placard, and it might be too hard to read. So I don't know if it would work as well, but here we can always see. It's always worth checking, and it still looks pretty okay. The idea is to not do things just because you can, but to do things because they're cool ideas. But I just wanted to show you some things that you could do with your type to make it more interesting. The things that I wanted to emphasize was, layering the text on top of each other and offsetting it, and also changing the opacity so you can overlap them.